Superman Legacy still stands for something. It's not the kind of superhero project that comes around very often anymore, and when it does, it tends to dominate the discourse on how and where comic book movies find their footing. You'd be hard-pressed to find a single soul who would argue that this Superman isn't one of, if not the most important movies of the year, and you might think that's an exaggeration, but the truth is that it's not. Superman is attempting to do what Iron Man set out against blindly, stumbling into something bigger, but the weight of context is heavier this time. Capes and cowls equate to modern-day myths, thus the DNA evolves quickly, and authenticity becomes stylized. The director's vision is everything for a project of this magnitude, and from the most flattering depictions of the last 30 years, those within the realm of sci-fi and fantasy and not, the denominator that mattered the most, the one that was crowned titan of them all, was Superman. Movies will grow past their primes into lucrative franchises or meta-commentaries on C-level mismanagements. Most, if not all of the best of them, will leave some mark on the culture, even attracting the world's best in cinematography from time to time. There is no doubt that what Iron Man made probable was additionally possible thanks to an underserved Blade and a larger-than-life Spider-Man. The Dark Knight became an opening week icon. The Avengers left the cinematic sphere standing still. Logan doubled down on its right to write without censorship, and The Batman changed the look of modern mythology, cult-like or Criterion certified. There are many more examples that round out my point, but the underline is this. Every comic book swings for a good story, but the greatest comic book movies connect with the trajectory of their vision. Every example you would consider adding to the list, regardless of cast or of script, shares a familiar focus. And yes, it was present in Man of Steel as its own Elseworld Superman story, honing in on the alien, for better or worse. So Superman in this go-around is a movie that has its dips, but it also has Superman, verifiably so. And that's what's really cool about it, is that I don't have to deconstruct how or why it fits together the way it does, or mull over my small nitpicks and longingly compare it to the legacy of other contemporaries. That's because it properly stands amongst them for a change, and that's the key I'd like to commemorate openly. I feel this is a welcome success story and an earned exhale for a studio that's been missing its iconic other half. In a world where I feel like I've seen every possible idea of a superhero movie, this one still feels new and is tweaked well for its age. And if nothing else, that is an achievement best befitting of someone as important as Superman. Imperfect, authentic, and colorful all the same. What makes Gunn's Superman, Superman? Well, unlike The Force Awakens, it does a retread of a classic formula without succumbing to summoning sickness. In a world populated by metahumans for over 300 years, Superman manages to stick out like a sore thumb in a dorky sort of way. Simple, right? In theory, yeah, it's just Superman, but practically he's expected to be the greatest of them all, but he's not yet. So building up his rhetorical, literary components requires some focus on stature, as well as strength and conditioning. It's an inordinary amount of creative prerequisites for one seasoned director, but Gunn is up to the task, and the promise of a new Superman can still inspire a conversation about real counterculture. That in and of itself is proof that something here worked. It's got us talking about Superman again, and what empathy looks like from an honest, kind-hearted hero. Cynicism is great if you're trying to stay alive, but to live, you need hope to do that. And Superman embodies it. To what degree he portrays that is reliant on the stage as a whole. That's what makes him more than just a man. His superpowers are only as strong as what is required of him. Consider it a kind of emergent boundary, if you will. Pictured in messy mock-ups of emotion and the occasional call to action against larger-than-life challenges. There springs something nostalgic out of David Cornsweat's suit. As some may otherwise dislike, it's genuinely refreshing to see Superman peaceful again. As black and white as he is, his contrast and simplicity works wonders in the age of moral counterweights. Against morally gray members of the cloth that break up the altruistic inkblots, it's great that Superman on its own two legs can stand without much interference, in a confident sort of way.
That's exactly where the issue is, right? Because what he didn't tell you was it was wrong to feel that way. There are feelings and there are thoughts. Your feelings about feeling bad are okay. It's not wrong for you to feel that way. You should just, it's not right or wrong anything. None of it is right or wrong. All of it is being vulnerable and being a human being. And in this moment, for you to talk about how it's okay to be vulnerable, you have to be vulnerable, which means showing Lex that your feelings are hurt in the point when you really shouldn't.
Superman in his own movie feels like the odd one out all the time, and that's what I came to love most of all. I don't mind the stoic portrayal of a hardened man of steel, but to get a rendition of Superman that isn't shy of earnest idealism or finding something outright silly, that's what I've really missed all this time. The proximity to an ideal ex machina is just as good as it shouldn't be, and an explicit choice that speaks volumes to how James Gunn and DC Studios sees Superman working in this modern age. It also speaks to how the film individually follows 3 different versions of Clark and Lois along 3 different inflection points in their relationship: Lois's apartment, Clark's apartment, and the Kent family farm. None of it works without this movie's story committing to the idea of them as a package, and the final cut is indicative of that. Superman and Lois are 2 strikingly different perspectives, but both of their moral boundaries align on the ethical straight and narrow. Seeking truth, justice, and a better tomorrow is fundamental to their characters. The professionals as we know them, the couple as we see them, and the individuals that we trust them to be are each sequentially, specifically explored, all within the context of Superman's visit to Moravia. A really astute way of telling a modern Superman story and a story of Earth. There are 2 sides of the coin to be told truthfully between Lois and Clark, but neither of which can be the singular way towards common ground. And I love that this dynamic is challenged and explored, for the first time really since the Donner films. It cares about the brain and the ideals just as much as the bronze, and the division between Lex Luthor and Superman, an egotistical psychotic imperialist versus an altruist with the power to express such power gently. That is the selling point of a great Superman story. Mastermind and modesty clashing via billionaire and farmer boy. If you ever doubted what kind of love went into this film altogether, James Gunn answers it right off the bat with the iteration of these 2 characters. This is a film where Superman can love and be loved, where he can honestly stand upright against interrogation from all corners of the perspective world. It's the kind of fan service that will make you believe in Red Trunks again. The agency to think for yourself, speak for yourself, and so on. It's a genuine gratitude for the beauty of life, and it only takes a little bit of love to translate that to color. And Superman brings it out of us because he knows no other way. That's what James Gunn gets. As a means of marrying image and interpretation, this version of the Man of Steel is quite cohesive and just as good as I think DC needed it to be to get the ball rolling. For some, it's as simple as having a strong male role model that doesn't capitalize on the suffering of others. For others, it's the scruples of an absolute moral good that sparks their curiosity and the inability to capitulate otherwise. Superman should feel like a lovable firefighter in many respects, someone who's always around when the fires start to protect the neighborhood and save the day. And he challenges our guilt, our shame, and our egos with pure innocence. For critics and cynics, he's just one of those characters you'll find yourself returning to, and more often than not, I've caught myself reaching for the notes in the lead up to the summer of Superman, trying to make sense of the need for campy charm like 2010's Captain America. Hammed up, of course, because this is still a comic book movie. David Cornsweet was tasked with something I feel won't get talked about a lot, so I did want to say, being earnest and believably so in the presence of irony-saturated cynicism, it is the characteristic that makes the character. He really does feel like a black and white moral litmus test because he is innately as such, and Cornsweet gets that right more so than many other renditions of Clark Kent from the past decade. This Superman is a goofy Boy Scout, but still loves seeing the world for what it ought to be, as intensely and as innocently as if he were still a kid. The love of embracing hard challenges and loving the idea of being a messy human is a core theme of the film, and it directly addresses the insane online sentiment that there is no reward for being a good person. That's just false. The reward for being a good person is the deed, the act of love beyond yourself. Some of these emotions were so clear-cut that it allowed the fantasy of this movie's adventure to take shape fully. Black holes and dimensional rifts to giant kaijus and stunning fortresses. Superman 2025 reminds me a lot of A New Hope in that way. Not just in its opening title card, but how it throws so many ideas at us constantly, rarely allowing us to sit still without the world being brought in more. A lot like how George approached world building in the first years of his universe. And it's the right kind of holistic framework that I think will set up DC nicely for the future, and even one that amplifies the creative desire for a Pattinson Superman shared universe more than anything else. Incremental steps into fantasy took the Avengers from people into positions of cosmic power, whereas Superman and DC can instead lean into that fantasy right off the bat, and the larger-than-life people change the stage for future stories, no matter how big or unbelievable those stories might be. That's the positives of working under the DC banner, and while all of that works to this movie's credit, there was also a noticeable feeling of sometimes what was lacking. How many key parts of this film seem to be left behind in the editor's bay, and that needs to be addressed for the future slate. But nitpicks aside, what this movie does understand, maybe more emphatically than just about any Superman story since the original, is what exactly Superman is supposed to be about. Now, you can argue to what degree the movie succeeds in selling you this version of the character, but for me, it does feel definitive. Not quite as one-for-one yet as Christopher Reeve, but definitive. Finding that feeling again is the tinder for a proper contemporary Superman, and I gotta say, parts of this movie are just simply iconic. It's hard to explain when the film has barely escaped the gravity of its own honeymoon period, but I clocked about 8 viewings of this bad boy, and listen, I wanted to reassess my understanding from the eyes of a lifelong supporter, and once as a first-time spectator, and then once as a Superman story of the week, and then once as an experiment of a filmmaker. What I learned is that with Superman, there is a variety of ways you can engage with it, and that doesn't mean it's more nuanced than anything else or deeper in some intellectual way. It just means that it's good and rewatchable. That's the first step. That's tough to bet against when the options have been bring Superman's world into ours and accept that, or bend to cynicism and lose out on your chance at a real fantasy. Gunn doesn't blink with this choice, and choosing the fantasy was the right call. If anything, this world loves the perplexity of the mix, a deeply resonant mocktail of culture and chapters or days of the week, sometimes structured in threes. Superman is the character I look to when I want fantasy to drive the world's fiction, and I want it to exist around someone who's morally binary. He is entirely black and white in his love for life, even subterraneously when he is on the defensive foot or a 12-minute deep breath from the bottom of the gut. Seldom do we talk about how simple that approach is, how contagious the innocence of good faith, God-fearing morality comes across, and yet how absolutely rare it is to see it unscathed. And why is that? For what James Gunn and DC Studios have been tasked with here, Superman Legacy was not a bad idea for the original title. I think it works because it illuminates a path for the future of Superman without pitting one of his interpretations against another, as all are in some way or shape abscesses of the larger character you'll find living here in this metropolis. If you loved Man of Steel and Henry Cavill's stoicism, you'll find fight choreography and solemn solo shots worth appreciating here. If you grew up on the Donner cuts with Christopher Reeve and the Clark Kent incarnate, then you'll see where the echoes remain. And just like Reeves, Gunn manages to craft an iconic apartment scene that answers more question about our characters than it asks. Many such character arcs in this movie work in their own pockets of threes, and Metropolis houses it all with the same kind of wonder found in All-Star Superman. Long drawn-off locked shots and heaps of humble modesty fill out an otherwise deliberately fast-paced story, one that might have benefited from a few more scenes of the day-to-day for the flannel-wearing Wayman. Elseworld interpretations or definitive character templates, all of it has some say at some point in this Superman story, and many have their place in the construction of this world, but the impact of a modern-day Superman is, I feel, best summarized by how well it presents its moral positions. And what I can say with absolute certainty, after committing to numerous viewings and a lot of money given to IMAX, is that this Superman, under this new DC direction and creative vision, is the floor from which all other DC Universe movies should be judged moving forward. Not because of quality, but because this one had the wherewithal to lean into what it is at its heart. Could the title cards have come in during Acts 2 and 3? Absolutely. Are there 15 or so minutes left in the editing bay that I wish we saw? Without a doubt. And Lord knows what the test audiences were thinking on some of those rumors online. But at least it got us talking about the important stuff again. It got us talking about Superman and the importance of being good. And for that alone, Superman has succeeded in the ways it needed to if DC really wants to be successful moving forward. And from here, the rest is just about the history up its sleeve. Light as a feather, stiff as a board, all that shit. I gotta say, I like this new world for Superman. It's fun that Lex Luthor is an overt asshole and makes a pocket universe openly modeled after Hades. Again, pantheons of classic literature often play a role in some of Superman's best stories or greatest feats, and here in this movie, it's no different. Kal-El charges into the valley of an anti-proton Styx and crawls at the feet of a Martian Charon on Lex Luthor's steroids, all to retrieve his Cerberus. It's right there. The 12 Labors of Superman were a driving story thread in Grant Morrison's All-Star run, and here the events are explored casually, set in front of inspired scores and rhythmic changes in sound design. The movie doubles down on the theme of punk rock and hope, and for the most part, those little details stand out. Clark gets angry at the internet for talking trash, Lois pours too much sugar into her coffee, Jimmy has an entire side quest as a modern-day male sex icon, Mr. Terrific can't stand Guy Gardner's loose application of the term vows.
Oh, that's part of the vows.
It's implied, yeah.
An implied vow.
Superman only ever refers to the fortress as his home, and Mr. Terrific's spaceship knows exactly where the Kent farm is located, even when no one else does. These are the little details that round out the world, and a credit again to James Gunn's attention to details. The dialogue is fairly sharp. Mr. Terrific is one of the best character castings James Gunn has ever gotten to work with, and I received my favorite shot of Superman in any movie because this shit means something to me. Also, showing the two different combat techniques between those in the Justice Gang and Superman alone as some small-town hero, cosmically speaking, that was cool. It highlighted his strengths, literally when he's saving buildings or doing little stuff we consider to come with physical prowess. While Green Lantern is lassoing down a giant kaiju and Mr. Terrific is hacking into a portal of a pocket universe, Superman does the cleanup. He catches buildings and grabs citizens out of harm's way and relocates animals when they're in danger. It's Superman. That's what he does. I found the mainline jumps in both time and scale to be as absurd as what the best Superman comics have brought to the table, and while pacing is a bit harder to translate in live action, every other frame of this thing made me want to keep watching. The music is also pretty incredible in this movie, as James Gunn has always had a knack for finding dope needle drops or open metaphors that become tone setters. Something about hearing John Williams' score again during our first flight brought chills that even the Man of Steel couldn't muster. It's really easy to look at this film and say, what did it do right, what did it do wrong, yada yada yada, but Superman in all of his strengths and weaknesses is sometimes scattered and other times romantic, equal parts heavy-handed and yet entirely as advertised. What I walked away with from Superman most was that it was very explicitly something new, and understanding that this Superman was made by somebody full of genuine passion for the character, who proved their love for comic books extensively in Guardians 3. Gunn can think in black and white when he needs to, and that works for a character like Superman. And while there's always room for improvement, his consistency on this front can't be understated. Did it always get stitched together the best ways? Not always. The seams that are there even on rewatch, but what I hope never gets lost in all of this is what it all means. In the growing shuffle of online commentary and dying rage bait, there is the movie itself and then the actual impact of it. Making Superman work is hard, and no matter which way you slice it, this is a Superman in all four quadrants, and it all works. That's why the possibilities feel limitless and why DC Studios feels so alive for the first time in a decade. And the final rising shot of Superman and Lois together may very well end up in the annals of motion picture immortality one day. Just putting that out there. An evolution of the many eras of Superman, a loving note to the Silver Age where superheroes were bright and simple and a world that feels bigger than all parts of it. That's what Superman 2025 is. And it feels right for the Man of Steel and this beacon of legacy. It's a pretty great start, DC. And as always, thanks for watching.